I'm going to pivot just a little bit because I had individual introductions. So with the size of this group, I'm going to pivot on the introduction side when we get there. I think I've had a chance to meet and get to know all of you. But if you haven't met me, I'm Alexa. I am proud to be serving our Deer Park community, our Deer Park staff, and students alike. So thanks for coming. You must be here because you're interested to hear what we have done since the last time we met in December. We have been eager beavers and just really racking our brains as to where to go, what our plans look like, working with the board, working with you all. Today is really about getting your input and feedback. I just want to say a few thank yous first, really to Brendan, to Steve, Cody, you're in here somewhere. Cody's back in the back, to Lindsay and to Eric. Just for really spending a lot of time behind the scenes, processing, doing the research, bouncing ideas off of one another. That's all the stuff behind the scenes and the time that we spend together, really processing and analyzing the feedback, the data, what do we think is going to work best for this community? What do we recommend? So just want to thank those folks up front for your time. And Lindsay, also just so that you know, we are live on a webinar. So if you have people who want to chime in, they certainly can. Lindsay's got this also, so people can tune in that way. It's not a two-way communication, it's just an ability to see what we're going over today. So today we're going to do a quick round of introductions so you can get to know who's at your table. Looking around the room, I understand you all know who's at your table, but you can say good evening to your table groups. We will review our purpose of the Facilities Advisory Committee and our goals for today. I'm going to do a quick recap of the last meeting and what it entailed and what it involved to kind of catch everybody up to speed. We had a nice long Christmas break and then the new year. So just to kind of recap where we've been, where we're headed, update you on progress and some conversations that we've had, some ideas that we like to share, and then ultimately share all that information with you and then gather your input and your feedback in return and answer your questions. We've got some experts in the room, like if you have questions about taxes, finances, bonds, levies, that's Brendan. If you have questions about the facilities in the current state and long-term planning, we've got Steve and we've got Cody in the back. So we've got people who, Alexa knows about this much, but then they can go a lot deeper in their like content areas, so to speak. We also have, raise your hand if you're part of the transportation department. Yeah, that's a big turnout. Thanks for being here. When we said bring a friend, Carrie and Stacy took that literally and brought the whole department. So thanks for being here tonight and thanks for coming. We look forward to hearing from you all. All right, so just at your table groups, because otherwise I think if we go around individually, it's going to take a long time. Just introduce yourselves. Who are you? What's your constituent group? And then something that brings you joy. I would like to start out positive. We are here for a common purpose, and that is to serve our community, to serve our kids, to serve our employees, and to make sure that we've got great places to learn and great places to work. So I'd like to start out on a positive note. So think about how you want to answer, and then take a minute among your table groups to introduce yourselves and say hello.
I'll go. My name is Brendan Myers, and I'm with the Deer Park School District. And what brings me joy, I would say, is my family. My son. Yeah.
You want to go each other? All right, Lindsay Lofstrom, parent, school board member. What brings me joy is my family too.
My name is Meredith. I work at Arcadia and also in the district and live in the community. It's my family, my kids. Right now. I feel married. I feel like I have to say my family. No, you don't have to. I feel like the lake brings me a lot more joy.
There you go. Going to like with my family.
Yeah.
I was gonna say golfing, but not the golf.
It's okay.
I love my family.
There's only 4 on.
That's okay. You can go for a week.
Hey,
I tried to watch last week's meeting.
It wasn't.
How come it wasn't streamed?
Because it's a
They
work
were not
session,
sessions. Yeah. They only stream.
the business meeting.
Yeah. Okay. I didn't know that.
Yeah. If you want to come hear us just chat, you have to come in person.
Oh.
Our working. Every meeting has to be open.
We are the facility advisory committee. It's open up to
Yeah.
anybody who would like to come and listen to where we're at, what we've got going on, to provide input and provide feedback. Ultimately, what happens is the recommendations and the ideas that come from this group go to the school director. Okay, we've got the school board of directors, so we take that information back, we share it with them, and if they roll it over, they think about it. They're the ultimate decision maker. They're on the side. The purpose of this committee again is to just ask the questions, look at the data, think about what we share with you, and give us some feedback. So today, we're gonna go over a myriad of information, and it's a lot of information. And my joke today was I'm gonna try to share this with you in a very linear, concrete, sequential, coherent, sequential way, but it's all embedded. So it's like, here's some information here, here's some information here. We might do this, we might do this, but I'm gonna do my very best to keep us in order, but feel free to ask questions along the way if you have them. Okay, because it's a lot of information, and things can be tweaked or pivoted, or there's a reason for this or a reason for this. Anyway, we'll go over it, but feel free to ask questions along the way. So just at the last meeting, just to recap what we did and what we went over, we reviewed the two previous bond measures that did not pass. And remember, the bond measures are a supermajority, so they take the 60% plus one. We ended up at about 51%, so pretty far away from passing. We analyzed the growth in the city of Deer Park and all the new plots of land and the homes that are being constructed, where they're at, what it's going to look like in the next 3 to 5 years. We took time to review that. We also provided you estimated costs of the projects. Remember, the facilities committee has been around a lot longer than me. From what I understand, and Eric, I don't mean to, where are you, Eric? To pick on you, but it's been around for, I want to say 15 to 18 years, Carrie, a long time, right? So when I came on board, the Facilities Advisory Committee had already established a list of priorities in order of need, age, where we're at, and the needs. So they had done some visitations, I think, to all of the schools and really assessed the needs of the various, so of the projects in need. And so from there, we took that, and that's what created the bond and the bond package. Today, we're going to go over some of the levy bond overview pieces. Oh, I'm sorry. This was the last time. We actually had Corey Plager from DA Davidson. He's our public finance guy that was able to go over what levies are, what bonds are, the historical tax rates, what the history was for Deer Park in terms of levies, where we are at with the bond. We know that the high school bond is dropping off at the end of this year. One dropped off at the end of December 2024, and the next one will drop off at the end of 2025. So then the high school bond will be completely paid off. And then we started prioritizing needs as a big group. That was kind of a recap of our meeting in December. Did I miss anything for those of you who are here? Okay. This is a group effort, so feel free to chime in. This is also a review. Again, this is what I came into, and this is what had been established prior to me coming to Deer Park. The transportation, this was presented at least 4 years ago, right? So that's at 90 years old. I think we're approaching the 100-year mark by now, right, for the transportation center. For access to small, you've all watched the videos. They now have an outhouse for an extra bathroom in case they're in need, all those kinds of things. Arcadia and DPE both have space constraints. But their largest need right now is Arcadia because they've got the 6 portables. They're out of space in the gym / lunchroom. They're combining PE classes. They don't have a cafeteria, those kinds of things. DPE space and growth also. HomeLink, they're here with us in the district office as well as at Clayton. They are about 585, between 585 and 600 students. They're also out of space here as we're growing with our students, we're growing with staff. And so we need more space and to accommodate HomeLink. And they've got the ball fields and DPMS. And so these were prioritized with the Facilities Advisory Committee several years ago. So we're just continuing with that work. And you can see why Transportation Center and Arcadia, the top two, was the bond that was run the first two times. And the little asterisk indicates that in order to complete the Transportation Center and Arcadia, this requires new land and a road. And we talked about that previously. Any questions on that? Okay. This is a vision of all of the projects and long-term we would buy. The hope is that we'd be able to purchase from the city these 4 plots of land. When we purchase the land, we would be on the hook for creating this through road from East D Street all the way up to Crawford to alleviate that traffic. I don't know, well, half the people in here, transportation folks, you're stuck at that roundabout and you're stuck in that traffic, but parents alike, this will help hopefully ease the traffic as well. The new transportation center will be to the east of Deer Park Elementary, and then the new elementary was slated to be there next door. Okay. And 2 through 5 to alleviate Deer Park Elementary's growth and move second grade up and build a large elementary school. Okay, so again, just a review of where we've been. These are local net costs because I didn't want to put so much text on here. This is one of those spaces that can get a little bit confusing. So if we combine the land acquisition with the road that I showed you yellow prior, the projected cost is $5 million. Okay. The transportation center, the projected cost is $7 million. And these shouldn't be new numbers for you, but there have been a few adjustments because over time there are additional costs that we all know that because it didn't pass the first time, we're expecting increased costs. That's just the way it goes when you're looking at 3 to 5 years down the road. A new elementary projected net cost at $46 million. Arcadia renovation for HomeLink, the projected net cost is $4 million. You're like, why is that? Remember, Arcadia, correct me if I'm wrong, Steve, in 2027 will be 30 years old and will be eligible for about $9 million of state match. So is it more now? Okay. And then the high school track and field. And then the new elementary school, that one is also eligible for some state match, correct me if I'm wrong, for unhoused students.
Yes, and that 46 million is the net after statement.
That's why it says net. So we don't get any state match, as you know, for capital projects, like the acquisition of the road and the land, and then the transportation center and HVAC and those kinds of things. That doesn't come along with state match or state funding. Okay. Questions on that?
How much land is that? How many acres?
Total is 42.
42.
42 acres for those who can hear. Thank you, Steve. Okay, so we met here, Facilities Advisory Committee, reviewed all of those pieces. And the one thing that I heard loud and clear was the first priority is to make sure that we're able to purchase the land and complete the road. I see nodding of head. That means we got it, team. That we understood that that was the first priority. Probably also I heard not to run one of the big bond like we did last time. But the question that did come out of this space is looking at an LGO bond, a capital levy, and other options. So then that posed the question of, okay, we need to look at what the different bond types are. Is there non-voted debt? Is there voted debt? This is where Brendan's expertise came into place. So we have been having those conversations about what they are, what they mean, supporting the board and understanding also what those mean, what those terms mean. I'll share them with you also. I'm just giving you a timeline overview right now. The board then met on December 9th and then again on January 6th and had some very long, extensive conversations about what to do, what the choices are, what the recommendations are, come back and ask and they ask us some questions. We go back and do the research and get the information. We come back with more information. So at the last meeting, we were able to come back to discuss capital levy options, LGO bond, and capital projects. I'll give you those definitions in just a second. And then also in the interim, the DPSD team is doing some work behind the scenes. So one thing that came out of the meeting was tell us what are the biggest pinch points at Arcadia right now. We know that it's not going to be getting a new school. We know that you're pinched for space. We know these things, but what can we do in the interim to help support Arcadia? So we met with Arcadia, got their priority list. We continue to meet with Corey to go over some of the finance pieces. We continue to meet at least 3 or 4 other times outside of that to make sure that we were really looking at and analyzing all the different, all the needs with the finances, with the projects, with all the pieces and with the bonds and the capital levies. We also really looked at small. So then I said, we've got to look at projects in terms of small, medium, and large, because for a long time we had just been looking at them at small and large, but we also have medium-sized projects, right? So if you're following the school board and the conversations, you'll know that we're redoing our whole camera system and cameras. That's a medium-sized project. That's a good chunk of change. So it's not a small little project where we're just going in and doing the daily maintenance, but it's a pretty good project that's going to take 2 to 3 years to be able to complete that. So I'll go over some of these with you. Missed anything, team? Did I miss anything? Okay. So that's the work that's been done since December 2nd. Okay, so here's a definition of terms. And Brendan, feel free to chime in. So we have what are called, so back when we ran the initial bond and levy, we had a levy. It was called the EP&O. It's the Educational Programs and Operations. That supports all of our activities, all of our athletics, our school resource deputy, anything that's not funded by the state, which side note is quite a bit, but it helps us keep our class sizes low also. It's all things like students, educational programs and operations. Now we're talking about a different kind of levy, which is a capital levy for capital projects. It is what it's called. There are also tech levies out there. Are there any other types of levies? Just capital levy and EP&O?
You do transportation levy.
Transportation levy. Okay. So capital levies can only be run between 1 and 6 years. There is no dollar limit. It's for capital needs and purposes. And this requires a simple majority, so the 50% plus 1. So it's different than the bond in that way. Then we have the EP&O levy that we ran. So educational programs and operations, that can be run 1 to 4 years. We run the 3-year, so we reissue it every 3 years. The maximum is $250 per 1,000. Remember, we asked for $1.50 so that we could make sure that we were eligible for state match, but we can ask up to $250. Our taxpayers, we've asked for $1.50. Okay, so then there's the LGO bond, and this one came up. What's the non-voted debt? It's called the Limited General Obligation Bond. This does not go to the voters. It's the district incurring debt without going to the voters to ask to go into debt, basically. The district pays the interest on that, and sometimes that can be quite hefty. Okay, and then there's the voted debt, which was the bond that we ran already twice before, and that takes the supermajority of the 60% plus 1 and can only be used for capital purposes. There are some other limitations on the LGO bond, the non-voted debt. It cannot be used for new construction. So the transportation center, for example, would not be eligible under the LGO bond. Okay, did I miss anything? Questions? Yeah, Caleb.
And then, so what are your existing revenue sources for an LGO bond? I mean, just state money?
So when you run the LGO bond, you just pretty much like the voted bond. Corey and his team would sell an actual bond. We would pay the principal using that revenue, and then the interest would come out of our general fund.
Gotcha. Okay.
One of the concepts is to pass a levy and then basically fund it with a bond, an LGO bond.
Yeah.
But there again, it doesn't solve the new construction issue because you can't use that bond for new construction.
Yep.
So
Yep. Good.
we've kind of taken that off this.
Can you guys all hear back there? Kind of.
Yes.
I'm looking at Beth. Can you hear?
Can you use it to buy the land now?
Okay.
Yes.
Yes. Okay.
Can I make one thing?
Yep.
So, at the school board, we've always tried to keep taxes low. Like we've been extremely conservative board. We've never we built the high school. We didn't want to raise taxes after that because it was quite expensive to do all that. And so we've always tried our levies, our everything else that we do. We try to keep our burden on the taxpayer as low as we can for this district. We feel that that represents us as a community. We're already getting taxed to death, right? We don't want to do any more than we can. We have to get things through. So that is why we went out. We've stayed low. We tried to keep that at $1.26 last time. We tried to keep the levies low. That's why we pushed the bond out to 27 years to not raise those taxes and still be able to do the projects. So keep that in mind. We don't want to raise taxes if we don't want to raise taxes. Right? So
I think we've gotten behind the 8 ball, though, Eric. I mean, clearly have a transportation facility that, if I'm wrong, you guys tell me, doesn't meet the needs of our employees at all. And Arcadia is completely maxed out to the point they were talking about when my daughter gets to the 5th grade, she's going to have to go to the middle school. So we're behind the 8 ball. I mean, at some point you have to kind of play catch up.
And we were trying to do that with the first bond. So it didn't pass. Folks, everything I heard was we don't want more taxes. I mean, that was the theme. Yeah. So, and I get that. But we didn't want to raise, I mean, our taxes are pretty high. Mine are pretty high. I don't know about anybody else's, but mine are pretty high. And we didn't want to raise those taxes anymore on the community in order to do it. So we tried to keep everything the same, not to raise those. And yes, I agree that we should have done the transportation facility a long time ago, but we also had a large tax burden going through those years. And we can fix Arcadia, we can add portables, we can do things like that. It's not the optimal thing to do. So, I mean, if this group comes back and says, we want to raise taxes to $3 a thousand, we can do all of that.
Yeah.
But I don't think that's the community sentiment.
Okay.
Just one more question.
Yeah.
So is the LGO bond, does that raise taxes?
No, but you'd have to run like a capital levy to fund that.
To pay
bond.
for?
Yes.
Okay.
But then you can use that capital levy to pay back the principal, but you'd have to use our general fund to pay back the interest.
I got you. Okay.
Great
So if we
question.
did the capital levy and the LGO bond, that would essentially just buy the land.
Depends on what rate you would want to run the capital levy. So if you ran like $1.26 for 3 years, you could probably get about 9 million,
How much is needed by land?
about 5 million.
But
But we can't use that for capital projects, right? So we can't do the roads, we can't do transportation.
the borrowed money cannot be used. As soon as you pay it back with the levy and you're getting more money from the levy, then you can.
Yeah, you can do renovations, additions, just nothing new building.
Yeah.
4 walls. You could do 3.
It's not.
It's not 4.
That's good.
All right, so we then looked at and explored what does non-voted debt capacity look like, and then just based on where we are financially, what our voted debt capacity is. So we ran like the $60 million bond and the $50 million bond. We actually could have gone up to 109 million. That's how much we could have gone up to. But if we do the non-voted debt, the LGO that you're talking about, we only have capacity at 8.6. That's the most we'd be able to go into an LGO.
And the voted debt will increase because after paying off this December's chunk of bond, it's going to go up by about $2 more million. And then the LGO, that's the limit we could go out for the LGO. So we'd have to at least raise a capital levy about that amount. So.
Yeah. These were questions that you had last time. So we just wanted to make sure that we came back to you with that information. All right, so here's some options that we have explored. We explored running a 5-year capital levy. So this, like running this November, And that would include the Land Road, Arcadia Needs Transportation Center. We could look at if that capital levy passed LGO bond. But like Brendan said, and his prior experience tells us the interest can be really high. We can't use it for new construction, so it wouldn't be able to be used for the transportation center anyway. So we kind of took that one. We didn't take it off the table, but it's not one of our top considerations. We don't know that we don't have enough without running a huge bond to run a new elementary school to say just Arcadia's needs need to be an LGO, right?
We go over what the Arcadian. Yeah.
Yep, that's next.
Okay.
Yep, stay tuned. Because we met with Arcadian, we're able to look as a team what those priorities are and then have some dollars associated with those. And then we also explored the idea of a capital levy, in which a 3-year capital levy, we could look at Arcadia's needs, do the land and road, look at some safety and emergency pieces for students that we need to be looked at. This one is contingent on a transportation co-op. So we didn't know that this existed as an option for us when we first ran the bond. Why? Because one, like Valley Loon Lake, they're already in a co-op, so that's not an option. Freeman's already in a co-op. Or secondly, several districts around us also contract out. Spokane contracts out through First Student or Zoom, and I think that Riverside does First Student. So those are not options to do co-ops with. And then the third one to look at is like Mead. Well, they already have a new transportation center. They don't need to look at a co-op. So we looked at many districts. They are a co-op. So we looked at many districts around us to say, where is our co-op opportunity? We didn't have one. We're still exploring that, and we're looking at that. We're researching that. And saying, hey, is there another district that's out there? Is it eligible? Are we eligible? That's a whole nother process that we have to look into because the districts need to look at the boards need to look at resolutions. Both districts have to agree. And we got the checklist from OSPI and it's like this long, right? To make sure you do all these things to see if you're even eligible. But we're exploring that. We're right in the infancy stages of that. The third option that we looked at is running a bond. And that's, I think, what Eric was just saying. If this group recommends to the board to run a bond for the elementary school, that's an option. The other option is if we don't, and we're not eligible for a transportation co-op, we could look at a 4 to 5 cap levy. Okay, and then do some of the same needs. Now the difference in why the years is because we have a choice as to what we want to run the capital levy at. Like Brendan said, if we wanted to keep it at $1.26, which is what we're at right now with that last bond falling off this December, we could keep it at $1.26. And kind of to your point, if we were willing to look at raising that just a little bit to like $1.50, we can get a whole lot more and in a shorter amount of time. So that's an option that we've been exploring. So if we kept the rate at $1.26, and again, these are all projected on assessed value. We're looking into a crystal ball, doing the very best we can. So if we ran a capital levy in November of 2025 at a rate of $1.26, this is the projected amount for each year that we would be able to get. Okay, so the total, if we were to run a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 year capital levy would be 16.9. You can always shorten that, right? So it doesn't have to be, it just can be anywhere between 1 and 6 years.
So 1 year to get you 3, 2 years to get you 6.2.
Yep.
It's just all added. Okay.
But you don't get them until the next year,
Yeah.
right?
Yep.
And the AV, it's just been a lot harder the last 5 years to actually project. As you guys know, your taxes went up, 28%, and no one could see that coming.
Mm-hmm.
Our other issues, well, not issue, but our other obstacles, we have a lot of new land and new buildings. So that also skyrockets, but we don't know when that actually gets factored into the county. So
Because when you pass a capital levy, you're passing the so many per thousand versus when we pass a bond, we're passing the total. Or no?
Levy's the same way as like our EP&O levy. You'll pass a dollar amount.
We
So
will
we
pass a dollar
project
amount. Okay.
what would $1.26 be. We think it's going to be $3.2 million for the first year, 3.5 the next.
Yep.
And then we say, okay, we want to run a $6.8 million levy,
Gotcha. Okay.
hoping that it comes in at $1.26.
Yep.
Now, if it comes in where the assessed value did not go up as much as we increased it, as we expected, the rate would go up on people. But what we can do at the board can do is actually do a rollback and actually not collect that total amount to get it back to that rate.
Gotcha. I assume they can't increase it if the.
We can collect all up to whatever voted, dollar amount. But if that,
Voted total,
Yeah.
not the voted rate.
but if, yeah, because it's really not a rate. That's just kind of
Yeah.
what people put out there. But if the rate would be more because assessed value did not increase as projected,
Yep.
we can roll back to that rate to collect less dollars.
Great questions. What other, well, I'm going to go on to the next slide and then let us know what questions you have. So then we looked at, what if we bumped it up to $1.50, right? And that's why we looked at and explored the option at a 3-year capital levy, because if we went up to $1.50 for a 3-year capital levy, we would end up at about 11.1. That's an option. So you could run, to Brendan's point, an $11.1 million capital levy in 3 years and be able to accomplish the land, the road, and the transportation center, plus Arcadia's needs. And I will get to Arcadia's needs. They're small compared to the transportation center because it's not building a whole new building. But okay, so that's why we had the 5 year, all the years in between, and then this one, so you guys can see the various projections and options.
So potentially on this, the transportation could be built significantly faster than the, okay.
Yep. So here's the other capital projects. Like I said, I was trying to go in order and we were trying to figure out what's the best order to present all this information to you in, but it's all kind of like this. So I'll get to I think kind of your question timeline. Shawnee, I'll get to your question. So you guys asked about other capital projects needs. We did talk about the roof and the HVAC for the gym specifically. That'll come out at about 1.5. So then it took time to go do all these cost estimates. So thank you, Steve and Cody. This is your area of expertise. Arcadia for safety and security. We are talking about adding fencing all the way around, right? For the portable areas and raising that fence to make sure that our kids are safe and secure and that the portables are kind of blocked off from the parent drop off and pickup area, and then making and funneling folks into the front door instead of directly to the portables. Does that make sense? So we looked at some fencing for added safety and security, the Arcadia flooring, we say flooring / new carpet, looking at some of the laminate flooring like the middle school has in the main hallways, but keeping the getting new carpet in the classrooms and the portables. That's one of their high priority lists. And then as a district, our emergency alert system is maybe 30 years old, Steve. And it's very much on the fringe of if something goes down, the Informacast that we have everybody that when there's an emergency, it goes to all the computers, all the phones and everything. If something goes awry, that whole system goes down. That's a high priority for the district for the safety and security of all the students and all the staff. That's needed. That includes the phones, the intercom, and that whole system. We put question mark. We don't know now what's going to happen with the Clean Buildings Act, the energy efficient measures, and all the new requirements that are coming for the new buildings. So there's a question mark with that. Did I miss anything? Anybody experts on the capital projects? So that's where this piece, when we're talking about the other Arcadia and other district needs right here. That's what to think about. We've got the road, the land, got the transportation center, Arcadia's, we call them Band-Aid fixes right now. The other thing we looked at and why we looked at the 3-year capital levy is because right now looking at K2 at DPE, our numbers are okay. Like our kindergarten numbers are actually kind of small right now. So we have a couple of years for Arcadia we know that they're not going to completely explode based on the current projections of DPE. After that, either the kids aren't born yet or they're not in school yet, so they're hard to project those numbers. But that's why we tried to scrunch it into 3 years. We know we can make it the next 3 years at Arcadia as status quo with some Band-Aid fixes. And the other thing about, go ahead.
Sorry, I'm sorry. It just seems like kind of lipstick on the pig. It does not solve the cafeteria. It does not solve the, gym space.
And that's
Correct.
exactly why
Yep.
we're suggesting we go with a 3-year capital levy.
Yep.
Because a longer levy would just postpone the bond issue,
Yep.
which was really the only practical way to address the primary concerns at both Deer Park Elementary and Arcadia. These are kind of interim measures. These are things that we think are feasible and doable under the guise of a levy. It would move us forward with the land, move us forward with transportation. It does not address, this list here are not the fundamental issues that Arcadia has shared with us. But those are of a scale that we cannot address without a capital bond and the funds that that would generate. So yes, this is kind of an interim thing, but it's something positive that we can do. We think it's feasible potentially to pass a capital levy, keep the rates at a reasonable rate, not let them fall off the financial cliff, and accomplish some important work, and not postpone it 6 or 7 years before we go back to the community.
That was the big piece, is the timeline. We were really trying to.
But that's enough time that the political atmosphere changes more to the positive than it has been in this past year with regard to municipalities and public entities like school districts trying to pass bonds. We're not the only ones that failed. There were just a very small handful of capital bonds that passed throughout the state. So we're not unique.
Questions on these? So one, back to the original plan of if we built a new school and HomeLink ends up in Arcadia, these are all things that would need to be done anyway.
Yes.
And then number two, we are at some point, 27, 28, we can get state match funds for renovation. What, do any of these, one, qualify for that? Number two, if we spend them prior to 28, are we able to still collect and say, hey, we spent this and get it after 28? Or pretty much if we spend it before state match is available, there's tough, we can't claim that later. Does that make sense?
So the most expensive element up there is the roof, which potentially could be covered as part of the state match. But if we do it early, we're not penalized for that, and it doesn't reduce the overall amount of match available.
Okay.
So,
but we can't get match on money that was already spent.
correct.
Okay.
Good question.
How long do you, how urgent is the roof? How many years?
I was telling Brendan's predecessor, John Ferguson, that we needed a roof 12 years ago.
Okay, so like,
So we've made repairs, we've band-aided, we've tried to keep it from causing interior damage and being inconvenient to students and staff. That becomes more difficult every year because that was a 20-year roof. We're at like year 28 right now. So it's lived its life, and it had some issues early on. So it's time. And it's money well spent.
I think
it's
we
an
have to
investment.
look at, right, I think we also have to look at not just the capital expense, but the human expense. Because from talking to Steve and Lori, every time there's a rainstorm or snow's gonna melt, like Steve and your team, you've got to run over there with the bucket brigade, and Lori and Steve are out there with the bucket brigade and mops. And is that really where we want our principal and vice principal and our staff having to be every time it rains or snow melts? I mean, there's a cost there too.
And if we run this, you can help me write the narrative. Right on.
Was it said, I thought we said that some of it was due to, some of our leaks were due to bad HVAC issues.
Yes.
Is that?
And that's HVAC design. It's not failed HVAC.
Yeah,
That's why
Okay.
Yeah.
So, but I was under the impression the worst of the leaks, like what they're seeing in the gym and everything, is more due to HVAC design, not to the roof, or am I misunderstanding that?
What they're seeing in the gym is mostly HVAC design. It doesn't change the fact that the roof
needs to be replaced. Yes. Yeah.
And the potential for that to cause harm to the interior is great.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay.
And as you can see, we have a whole string of other projects. So let's say we end up with some additional money or something. Like we've got a whole list of other like medium-sized projects that we can be taking a look at, from the middle school siding. The middle school, I put sign, but it's really the reader board. We started talking about that. The keys here and the fobs and the system that we have is antiquated and old. So again, this is safety and security, the key project, and then looking at the track and field. Yes.
Why do we need middle school siding already? Where at?
It's like the concrete on the side there. Isn't it a concrete wall or it's when you pull a stucco or something? Yeah, it's coming
It's
off.
part of the existing building, not.
Yeah.
You decided the wrong term.
Yeah, but yeah.
Built the new part. Why is that?
Not that.
It's an old part. Yeah, or stucco.
Thank you.
Or,
Yeah. Great feedback.
Yeah.
I can change that. Thank you.
I
So, yes.
think we need to say that these are all projects that come up. We as a board have been saving money. That's how we were able to do the middle school project without going to the taxpayers. We're saving money every year, as much as we can put into our capital projects fund when it's left over at the end of the year. So if we, and I think we have about 1.8 million in there.
About 4.
About 4 million. So if the roof were to die tomorrow, we could fix the roof, but we can't do all of the projects and deplete the fund. So it's kind of balancing your checkbook, right? You can't do all the projects and have no money to do the other.
That's correct.
Quite the,
It's kind of like the contingency plan. We want to have those funds in case something happens. Exactly. Okay, so here's just a review of the project total cost of the highest priority that we're talking about right now. The land, the transportation center, Arcadia's needs. So it comes out to approximately 14.1. Other revenue for us to consider. See, Eric, exactly to what you were talking about. We've been saving dollars over time. So we just said if we went to $1.50 for 3 years, we could end up at an 11.1, right? There's still a gap, but we can save money over time. So that depends on our board deciding to save money over time to be able to complete these costs, right? And then other things that we can consider too is if the co-op comes to fruition, that could free us up for some dollars too. So those are potential other revenue sources for us to look at.
So have we looked at contracting our bus service? I mean, the only reason why I ask is you talk about all the school districts that we can't co-op with because they're all contracted. So if everybody else is doing it, have we looked at it?
I think it was looked at before I got here, right?
I don't think it was looked at. I think that even if it was mentioned, I bet you about 3/4 of us would stand up and walk out. Have you ever heard the reviews?
Yeah, and trust me, I respect that and I understand that. I mean, and I'm not saying that.
We pride ourselves on different.
No, and I'm not disagreeing with any of that. I'm just saying though that I think that the taxpayers have to expect the district to look at all options.
Yeah.
And to say.
You're right.
At least what is the cost of that and why it's not a good idea or why it is a good idea.
Here's what I might say just in short. Our buses are $250,000 a piece.
175,000.
Okay, 170. Maybe those are the electric buses that we're coming out. Anyway, so $150,000 a piece, and we have 30.
Yes.
Okay, so multiply that times 30. Those are ours. We own them. That's our fleet, and that is a huge asset. That is for us as a district, right? So those are our buses. If we were to cut, we would lose all of that because they would belong to us. Yeah. And not to mention our people.
No, I don't.
I mean, right?
Yeah.
So, but there's a lot of.
Yeah.
But you're right.
I'm just more curious.
a number of years ago, we evaluated looking at that thing, and it wasn't cost effective when all of our buses are on the rotational schedule.
Yeah, depreciation.
We own all that stuff. The human factor comes in there, but it wasn't cost effective by the time we would sell everything to the new thing and not bring it back.
Yes.
I'll also add that something new. I was just talking to a neighboring district today that is new just this last year's districts still have to pay for their benefits. So there's no benefit in not having our own folks. They're still paying first student for their bus driver's benefits. They're still paying Zoom. They're still, so the district still is incurring those costs. So I don't see it as a cost benefit, especially now at all.
Great question. Thank you.
Caleb asks good questions, right? From an outsider and from a citizen's perspective, because I've had that question come too. Okay. But exploring other options, So I kind of mentioned that we are looking at this transportation co-op opportunity. It's not guaranteed. We don't know if it's going to come to fruition. It's a lot of red tape anytime you're trying to access state funds and state money, but we're going to continue to plow through, continue to research it and see what we can get.
Does that mean that it will all of a sudden be paid for?
And not necessarily.
Okay.
Might mean we get some help and some funding.
Okay. Some more matching.
It's worth going through the red tape.
Yeah.
Just to
Yes.
Yeah. With the preliminary information we have, potentially it could pay for about $3 million of the cost of building a transportation center. So it's just slightly less than half but that's still 3 million we would have to raise locally in
Right.
order to do that.
So
It does put it in a different time frame. It has like with anything that money is not free. It comes with strings attached, and we have to play by the state's rules for timing and the contracts. But that's all worthwhile, I think, if we can be approved for that extra funding, because it makes it possible sooner with a shorter levy period, and it allows us to solve the transportation problem for our folks.
So
And right now, I think the one.
co-ops for dummies. Tell me what it is.
That's what I was going to ask. Do you guys understand what a co-op?
Yeah, I mean, I think I
Go
know,
ahead.
but
The parameters.
It's a contract agreement between our district and at least one other district that has to partner with us in that. They have to agree to have their at a minimum, have their bus maintenance performed at our facility for a minimum of 10 years. They also allow other districts to participate at the contract level, which is a lower level of commitment. It's 3 years. But we have to have at least one partner district to do that. They designate a certain portion of their transportation funds to go in. It's almost like forming a corporation. And so you have both entities, both school district contributing to that entity for operations, and then costs or expenses are paid out of that operations fund. So it's kind of creating a straw man intermediate district for transportation between whatever school districts participate in that. And the state supports that because they feel that's a more efficient way to operate transportation facility.
are we sharing buses and drivers and all that, or we're sharing the transportation center?
It's the center, and it's at this point, the minimum requirement is only maintenance.
Maintenance,
So we
okay.
feel that it might allow us also to cooperate for training, for driver
Yep.
training,
Yep,
for other aspects of that.
gotcha.
So you would have to do maintenance, like our mechanics as well, or are you just talking about like DOL?
Maintenance is the critical function that has to be critical.
Because-
They won't allow just training, Carrie. That was something I was hoping for, but we could include training, but at a minimum, the WAC itself references bus maintenance.
So Freeman did fuel, that's why I was, did the co-op on fuel, that's why I was.
So we will set up a time to explore it a little bit more and get more information. We're still in the very, very surface level places. So I don't know that we can answer all those questions yet.
Have to find school districts that are close.
Yes.
Exactly.
Yes,
And then you get to Deer Park.
Yes.
You don't want to be in.
we're limited.
Is there even a close one that isn't contracted out yet or?
Potentially, we're working on it. We just don't know about the eligibility factors.
And
Specifically
one of the
sabotage
questions
their
was, this would not start until say we pass the co-op, we did all that stuff, until the new facility starts. The new facility's built, then the co-op would start, right?
Well, I think we can do some stuff. Board can work on the resolution. We can work on the
But I mean, as
MOUs.
far as maintaining their buses or doing it.
Oh, sure. Yes. Yes. Okay. So here's a potential timeline that we would like to offer and to get your feedback. This assumes that we have a co-op in place and we get about $3 million, as Steve shared. Assumes a 3-year capital levy at approximately $1.50 per thousand, right? It would be an it's supposed to say $11.1 million levy. Plus, it assumes that we're going to be saving money. The board is going to be saving money for these projects over time as they have been. So assuming that all that to be true, levy passes in November 2025. We don't get any of those funds until 2026. So by the end of 2026, we will have the 3.5 plus the savings that we already have in the capital projects right now. So at the beginning of 2027, that means we would be able to then complete the land and the road sooner than we've anticipated, right? Then, as the levy is continuing, we're going to accrue for in 2027 another 3.7. That's when we can start beginning those Arcadia miscellaneous projects that we went over that equated to about 2.1, looking at safety and security projects. Then by 2028, we will accrue another $4 million, plus we'll have some carryover left over from 2027, plus our savings, plus the co-op, and we can start the transportation center. So we moved up the timelines. Then the goal would be to run the elementary bond in 2028. That's better than 7 or 8 years out to run a bond or to get the transportation center.
I thought the land was 5 million.
The land plus the road was 7, right?
The land and the road is 5.
Oh, sorry, land and road's 5.
So what's the,
So if we only have 3.5, how are we?
plus we have 1.5 in savings, 1.4
That was
in
the
savings.
savings from the, if that was the co-op goes through, then we'd get the most
No.
from the co-op.
I think it's the savings.
Capital savings.
Yes, the capital
got
savings that
savings.
we already have accrued.
Every year we put some money into capital project savings.
We take the 1.5 and the 3.5, spend it on the land, and we have 0. So if something goes to crap, what are we doing then?
Can you give me an example?
So let's say we've spent the savings, we spent the 3.5, and the roof blows off in a typhoon wind that comes through off of the high school, let's say.
Insurance.
Insurance.
Yes.
One, don't you?
But is it gonna actually cover the whole thing? Where's your deductible money coming from?
If you have to, you can go borrow it. I mean, if it all came down to it, you go borrow it.
That's why I wanted an example,
No
because that's what
doubt.
insurance will cover. You know, Elmira that burned down.
You're not gonna be
Insurance.
paying the full amount for the road, right, when you start the project with the road, right?
Yeah, good.
I don't
Because
know
you
how
gotta
that,
finish the
I don't know how that
construction,
Right.
because you don't pay them all the money right up front,
Right.
Sure.
so it's gonna be.
You get 3.7 million.
an evolution.
Right.
Uh-huh.
Anyway, so
as
this
we're
is
making
where
progress, more would be
we
coming down.
landed in terms of a potential option. To move the timeline up with a slight increase. But that's okay. We're almost there. We're almost at the end. Hang tight. So this is where we want your group thoughts, right? Is this levy the right solution? Is this something that we want to be able to take to the board? Right? And if so, or if not, let us know your ideas. But then, secondarily to your point, how should this be communicated? What should we be including in the conversation and communication? My question is, how do we communicate with those not connected with DPSD? Right? If we know that we have about 10,000 voters in Deer Park School District, only about 2,500 of those are our own families and parents, how do we get to the other 7,000? I would love people's ideas for how to communicate outside of here. Anyway, so that's your task right now. And you guys can talk in your table groups. I have handouts because I do want to collect your thoughts and ideas. Are we on the right track? What other suggestions can you guys come up with for the table group?
When we're all done here with everybody's ideas, these will all be brought to the board. And we can, because in the end, we have to make the decision. And you guys are the community that we don't talk with all the time. We very much like, this is the way we get into it. So we're really trying.
Wish I could see the 5 and 3. Like this is my pleasure.
I hope for them for the years, but I know like when you're developing, you have to do Deer Park City, like, mix all of them really, because like, we need to double lane a lot of the stuff.
Yeah, so into my driveway that they're in because they want to know. Yeah. Literally.
So if we did the 3-year capital levy at the $1.50 and then we ran a bond to just maintain that $1.50, do we know how many years that $1.50 would have to run to get
Full bond.
Yeah, a full bond at that to maintain that $1.50 rate? How many years it would have to be to build to get the 46 or 50?
It's on this page. It's under community and public. So these facility advisory committee notes and information is requested are on here, right? So here's the project. There are links right here. How we arrived at the numbers of the cost. It's all on this website. So your ideas and your feedback and what you want the community to know, that's up here. as you guys have been sharing with me.
The only reason I say that is, can I put that in the chat?
Sure.
How do you?
Great.
Because it does
Yeah,
that is a
one guy
to say what we could do is
for the last.
like get out of here.
Were there?
Basically here.
Is that or no? No. Like higher. Like Dave's presentation.
But is anybody on?
Oh,
We have a couple people
yeah,
on.
yeah.
So if you go into menu, hi everybody that's on.
And they were like,
If you go into the facilities advisory committee here, and you can get in, see our notes and have links to.
and they're like really like that.
Here.
If you were like.
Perfect.
That's pretty much it for
Seven and homeless. For my presentation.
Thank you.
Okay. Otherwise, I'm like, do we keep filming? Are we gonna summarize?
They can stay on if they want.
Yeah.
That's pretty much now she's getting feedback. So
We're just gonna get feedback from folks and then we'll come back and summarize. Like 10 minutes, 15? Okay, so.
And if I had 3 years.
I don't see.
Private comment.
That way. Well, part of that, but then it's just like 3 years. And a separate rate. Generally, I don't know. Yeah. We lived here that much. And March, like our house. Stuff. Yeah, so we went from 150 to 300. And I was like, it's making it. Now, it's a little bit. Right, like, it's like, oh, yeah, that's gonna be okay, like, but with that unknown, I know.
I'm like, come on. But
Maybe, right, yeah.
I don't know. But it's definitely people's response to the first time, even though it was the only time. And the political atmosphere was and money and everything. Yeah.
That's
They did break it down on how many voters, didn't they? The whole time that how many voters say yes. And that, or not yes, no. But didn't they break it down somewhere? Like, so they were explaining that where we were at that day when we wanted. I think, yes.
Nothing to that.
Even though it doesn't sound like
I think 11. Just because it's the 50%. Like you already watched 50%, right? Even at the. I think if you don't focus on that.
like most people.
Well, yeah, but it's what, 20, yeah. Right. 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 Yeah. 5 years out, so it's going to be he's probably not. But it lives right
I do like the 3 year better than the 5 years. Because I was like, we have to, let's do that. Originally we said like 6 years. But I was like, that pushes it out so far. That's why I freak out.
And I very, and as I'm walking around, I'm trying to like, how can you fix it? I'm working for the which I and I go to kind of position to show how things are. So it was the Friday for Celebration Shooter Buck Code. And she's back in counter. Anyway, somebody's water. They're old and they're outdated. I don't know, they're kind of things, but not really. Like every college just have it, they didn't even want it. I mean.
Having OnStar to get look at it. A lot of the stuff is going to be over $1 million. Start
So I've been asking,
Well, I mean, the logistics of that was great, but it's not to get the kitchen where the kitchen is, they still have to close the key back and the shuffle. Yeah, that
Right, or they can go out and walk it out. Yeah, and so then. Correct, plus we lose playground space, I'm assuming, which we don't have, it's not big enough anyway.
I know. But like that, it's like, it won't pass, not this. If it was like a year or two good economic, then it would, but.
You already feel like it's how it's leveled down before you go. You do it right away.
Right.
Yeah. Okay, so in that 3-year time frame, when you run the bond, you just wait till that levy's done. And you run the bond for the but like, where's the time where you could vote bond and have it one in and again? And then it would start.
Right. Which
I don't think we should run it. Because
right.
That's odd when you do it. 2 years. Yeah, there.
At what, 2 years, how much? Would that be like?
For example, levies down to 2 years. 2 years. Yes, really, right, so like capital projects.
What if we do this year? You're potentially close to, well, like half of it, 500, like an average.
But our average, like on
Yeah, it's not that can't call it dental. So we do work.
And then whatever.
All that stuff. So we spent all our.
Oh, yeah.
Overall, right. It's not right now. Not aggressive.
Yeah, that was nice. I was thinking $2. Right. Because really.
Because I don't.
And that gets over to me. Was the high school not on 2 different lots? Is that when it's two drop off? Right, yeah. Yeah, they were sitting there. Well, that's why we.
$1.75. That would do.
Something we have that job.
Really ideally, really. That's but that'd be your.
The other
Lady Grace, would like to start out with some ideas. Brendan, can you grab some of these notes? I know we're gonna pick about 2, but maybe grab some of the notes if they're shared. Stephanie, your table has some ideas.
Oh, I was talking to my son, sorry. Having employees and kids and a lot of the people that are part of the school district letters to the editor saying what they would love to see and how their work environment currently is and that kind of stuff.
Well, and even retired and people who used to have kids in the school district but don't anymore, and they're willing to pay for bonds and levies. Why? And how does that impact them? Because we're one community. We need those voices.
Everybody is really like 5 people outside of your space. I think you can travel 50. Radio. What other ideas do you have? Anything wide open. I know this year you talked a lot.
Yeah, I think we just have to be transparent and open with the voters, and we have to be real about that. I mean, I know we don't want to like point out specific things like at Arcadia with security or around the schools that are security. We don't want to show somebody, hey, if you want to kidnap a kid, this is what you do. But we also have to be real with the voters because I don't think everybody understands that there are some security issues that I know the team is working on, but we need money to make sure that our schools are secure. It's not the same thing when we all went to school not to age us, but let's face it, 40 years ago, let's say, playgrounds didn't have to have fences. They do today. That's just the reality of the world that we live in. So we just need to help educate voters that it's not the grade school that you went to school in, it's the grade school of today. And what are those needs? And I think the same thing like the transportation department. We need to just say, you know, hey, it's a 70-year-old building. They have an outhouse in the winter to go to the bathroom. You know,
Cheered for that.
there's no lunchroom for them. You know, we just have to be open and honest with the voters so they paint that picture so they know this is what it is, the day in the life of a bus driver. Same thing with Arcadia, you know, we're at max capacity. We have people running around doing the bucket brigade. You know, this is why we need money. It's not rosy and gay. It's got problems.
So I think we found one of our first writers, Stephanie.
I also think you guys need to have your committee before you mail stuff out, post it, whatever, have other people look at it. Because like if I was a voter and I saw the middle school thing, I'd go, so do you need more middle school money? Versus now if you put, okay, it's the concrete. So I think you need to have other perspectives.
Well, the 5-star hotel that came out in the first one, I think this
that
committee
ticked off a lot of heads, you know, like.
Yeah, so it was a rendering, and that's what his, I was being asked last year, or why didn't you put up pictures? I'm like, we did, and we took them right off immediately because we got that feedback immediately.
Yeah, so this committee looked at the wording and like if you had Facebook posts ready to go, that could edit that, look at the pictures and go, yeah.
And if people have ideas for what should be communicated, please let us know.
Yeah, we were also talking about like with Facebook, it's great because you hit a lot of people from a diverse area. But perhaps turn off the comments because often what we've found, or at least what I saw, you know, it'd either be someone from the school district or from someone from the committee who meant well, but all you did is turn off voters. It became very combative conversations and you turned off more voters than you pulled in. So maybe just turn off the comments and say, if you have questions,
message us.
Go here and have a way that you can capture those. And that way the messaging, we as a group can see what are the voters asking? What are we clearly not explaining well? Because that's a question that keeps coming up. And then we can make more posts or newspaper articles so people understand.
Productive.
We've got to educate the voter.
I think that's a two-way street. I think the comments need to be positive on both sides. I was just going to say social media from within to out needs to be positive.
Just turn the comments off.
Yeah.
I would say turning off the comments though probably won't do much because typically the vast majority of the conversation does not occur on the district's Facebook page.
But if you, for the good of the goal, it needs to be positive.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah.
Sure.
Honestly, it's awesome to see this many people here having an opinion. We've invited people for years. This is the first time we've had more than probably 15 people, Caleb, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And so thank you all for taking your time to come and help this process.
I think one of the things that we were talking about, and this is around a lot of the requests for more information, is granularity to these numbers. So we're going to spend $5 million on land and the road. So how much of that is the land? How much of that is each individual part of the road? We have streetlights, we have gutters, because that seems to be, everybody sees this number and thinks that's insane. Highways don't cost that much, blah, blah, blah. We need to have a better idea of where that comes from. Same with
how this page was developed.
Yeah.
If you haven't been on here, please take a look at it. It's exactly what we've been asked. So this has been up for, for a couple of months. And it's been advertised. Please take a look at it. Tell me, is this the information we need? And we'll have people put up the information. If not, give us the sound bite. We're open. We want to make this work for all of you.
Yeah. And I think overall, we have to do something. I think that's clear to everybody that's here in this room. We have to do something. So a 3-year capital levy is probably the way to go. But we're going to have to make sure that the voters understand that means we're doing this 3-year levy. We're going to do this bond. That's what it is, right?
In 2028.
So we're going to purchase this bond. We're going to take out this bond and the levy will be used to pay this back. And why we do that. So we get that cash up front so we can get stuff done. We just have to make sure that voters don't feel like We voted on a capital levy and then the school district went out and got, financing. What's that?
I don't
I don't think that was part of it, was it?
the recommendation was not to do the non-voted debt because of the interest
Because of
and
that?
because we can do it in a shorter amount of time
Okay.
with $1.50.
I think it does make sense though to lay out the whole plan. The plan of capital levy for 3 years at $1.50, renew that into a bond at the same rate to build the elementary school, to kind of lay out the whole plan. That this isn't just $1.50 for 3 years, but we want to maintain this $1.50, and that's how we're going to end up with the elementary school. Because I think some people might say, well, heck, all of a sudden now what? We don't need Arcadia replaced. So I think we need to also explain part 2 to get Arcadia replaced.
Right. We
So-
also need to emphasize that the district has saved money to
Yeah.
go into this. That needs to get out to the community. Otherwise, they're always asking for money. Well, we're using our money, so.
Yeah, and I mean, I passed out some packets of documents that Jerry asked me to bring tonight, and one of them was the rough draft of those facility strategic plan. And to your point, Caleb, I don't know if you've seen it, but that's what he put in there. It's just laying out like, this is buying the land and the road, and then this is the next thing we're doing, and the next thing. But what he doesn't have in there, which was a good point, Caleb, is, at what point are we going to need another bond or a levy, or how are we financing those things? Like, this is the order of importance, and we probably need to go through something like this and figure that out as a committee. But then, like you said, interject in there, okay, this capital levy is going to pay for this, this, and this, okay? And then now we need another bond. We can't do it with a levy because of these requirements. So we have to have a bond. So be ready, taxpayer. And if it's at 1.5, it's going to be 30 years. If you want the bond to be 15 years, it's going to have to be at 2.5. Different options. So we start putting it out there in their mind that your taxes are going to go up, or, there's more houses. I just saw them breaking ground on a new thing again today. So, and I know it's hard to educate people on taxes. You want to deal with it. I hear taxes, I just want to plug my ears. But, helping people understand that as the Deer Park community grows, that burden per household is going to get spread across. That's true.
Not to derail. If we got to do the 3 years, I think that's great. But one thing that Brandon had mentioned is it would land on another election year for the bond. So if we want to avoid that, he ran some numbers about doing a 2-year capital levy at 2 years at $1.75. It would, both these scenarios would only work with a co-op. It probably wouldn't work any other way. Would be about $8 million was the first one in 2 years. And then if we did a $2, it would be 9.7 million in 2 years. And then that would, what year would that be? 2027 to run
with the
yeah.
And then you could tell them the bond was saving them money.
So there's a thought there.
So would it be advantageous of us for us to go back and get feedback? $1.50, $1.75, $2.
I think we did a poll.
Can you explain how election years work, the votes and how we have to have X amount of votes real quick? Since this was an election year, how come we need to have so many votes? For now?
Because it's a bond.
For a bond.
Yeah, a number, if we get.
It doesn't really apply to capital levies, correct? Just bonds. It has to have the 30%
I think it
turnout
applies to any election.
No,
the year after.
To validate
Just
capital,
talking about
you don't need the percentage of the people that turned out. Right now, it would be in this year's presidential election. If we were to run a bond, we need that percentage to validate.
You have to have 40% of those who turned out from the presidential election the next year if we ran a bond, but capital levies don't apply.
So then why would it matter if it lands on a presidential year?
Because sometimes you don't get the actual validation numbers and then that wouldn't count. But with our last couple elections, we have met those validation numbers. So we are more solid than we have been in the past.
I think what Brendan's thinking is looking ahead and running the bond for the elementary. Is it gonna follow a presidential election?
But if it fell in 2028, that validation would be an issue. If it fell in 2029, that validation.
Yeah, it depends on when you run it. Yep.
Yeah.
It's all, that's why it's like this, right? If then, but maybe that's what we do and that's our commitment is sharing as a group because you all gave me your email addresses and maybe I just pull this group and you let me know what your thought is. It's hard to get out to the masses, but are we looking at $1.50 or it sounds like $1.50, but if we get $1.75 and if we get $2, it'll only need to be a 2-year, right?
But only if we get a co-op.
I guess when we ran the first time, so in February, there was big pushback about raising taxes. Because the board showed, so do we really think that so right now we're at the $1.26, right? And so do we really think that we could run $1.75 or $2? No way. I would be very nervous about, even going to $1.50, I think there's going to be an immense amount of pushback to raise everybody's taxes.
I would much rather give you $2 for 2 years over $1.26 for 27 years. Because at some point in that 27 years, you're going to have to come back and ask me for more money.
Well, understood, but I just think the appetite, I don't care if it's for a year or what, we're wanting to raise taxes. That's just my gut feeling. I could be totally wrong, but that's my concern. So
Right, but I think that you have to show the value for that increase in tax. I mean, we can keep our heads stuck in the sand and stick with 126 and take 6 years to get the capital levy, but
if you couldn't pass it before, you think you're gonna get further asking for more money?
Why don't I follow up with this group with a poll? And you guys can go and everybody ask a couple of friends, let me know. I'm curious because I know we're not hearing from all the voices in this space. But if you guys go out and ask your friends, what do you think? Let's do a poll and I can bring it back to the board.
So
I think that's a great option.
one of the things that we've talked about is we would like to do something.
Hold on.
So one of the things we would like to do is something at the November election. That's our goal. So we're going to ask you folks to help us get prepared for that thing and to help us make a good decision as to how to fund these projects by that time. But we need to know if there's like a date when we have to put it on the ballot. So that date is, I think, July, August. Okay, August. Yeah. So we have to know what's going to happen, what we're going to ask, how to do these things by when, Brendan?
We should have it by early July.
By July 1st. To do that. So there's lots of ideas and lots of things out there. Please, if Alexa can do that, put out a poll, give us feedback, go over all of it so that we can see how the community, and you guys are the community. I mean, many of us have lived here for a long, long time. Kim's got 16 grandkids here. So we represent the community. We represent everybody in it, not just my street or your street or whatever. So give us your ideas. How to do this. We've tried it.
Email me, or take them to the team, write them down. I will take any and all input, feedback, information you guys have. I really appreciate you coming tonight. And stay in touch. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. I don't know.